Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Amy and I'm here to talk about all things related to books, both the books that I've read, the books that I've loved, and hopefully the books that I'm writing. And if you are new here, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. And if you have been with me for a while, thanks for coming back. I really appreciate it. So today we're going to talk about, if you've looked at the title already, you kind of already have an idea. I'm writing my first cozy. So we're going to talk about that process a little bit today. So if you enjoy the kind of content that's about reading books and writing books, please feel free to hit a like and subscribe because it'll really help my channel grow, because I'm going to be talking about the whole process from start to hopefully, no, definitely finish my novel, along with the struggles that come with being a neurodivergent writer. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so I've really wanted to be a writer, and this is pretty cliche, but pretty much since I was a little kid. I first got into the idea of writing because I was a big reader, in second grade particularly. This was before my diagnosis of ADHD, before we really knew that it wasn't just a little boy issue. I was kind of labeled two things: a chatterbox and a crybaby. So in second grade, I did have a wonderful teacher, and when I was done with my work, instead of talking to other people and get them off task, she would have me read, and she would just give me books. And that was when I just fell in love with reading. And then I would spend all my free time in elementary school in the library and hunting for books and reading books, and it was great. And then we'd go to computer class and we would get these little assignments, and I would write these little short stories. I think my earliest short story, and it might still be saved somewhere on like that old school printer paper, but it was about a little fish, in a little fish in a little pond. And it was a very short story. It was probably like two paragraphs long, but I remember like really enjoying that story and feeling very proud of myself that I had written my own little story. Um, but I had never really written anything big, or that long until later. I mostly wrote like poetry in high school, and I just did a lot of reading. And life got kind of busy. Plus, we'll talk about how ADHD kind of had some fun things going on back then that made it difficult for me to move forward with my writing. Now I'm 42 years old and I'm really ready to take writing a lot more seriously. I love cozies. I think they are so fun. I think they're sort of the best of both worlds because there's like some dark elements to them, but they're also really funny. Like the ones that I love have a lot of humor in them. Sometimes there's a little bit of romance in there, sometimes there's not. But I really just like the overall structure and formula of a cozy. Not to say that they are formulaic and all the same, although I do see like some cliche things in cozies, but I think that's partially what I like about them as well, because they're comfort reads. So you know what to expect when you're going into a cozy, that you're going to have usually a female sleuth who's just a regular person. She doesn't work for law enforcement. She's just out there living her life and discovers a murder. And usually she's a suspect, or someone she loves is a suspect, or someone else is in danger that she knows, and she wants to solve this murder in order to clear her name or someone else's name, things like that. So she gets invested in the story, but you're also seeing her with her own personal problems kind of grow over the course of the book, and then solving the mystery also helps her grow as a person as well. And I just really like that. It's just, you're taking these dark elements of a murder, but then also all these other like cute cozy elements where there's usually like a really just fun setting or cozy setting, and usually there's like a lot of food described. Sometimes there's pets. I love pet cozies. So I just think it would be really fun to write one, and I feel like I have a decent idea for one, so that's why I want to write a cozy. So in 2011, I decided, and this is going to sound crazy, but work with me here. In 2011, I decided I was going to write my first novel. I had a 6-month-old child at the time and I was on maternity leave. And that was the time that I thought would be the best time to write a novel. And not just start writing a novel, but write my first novel and write it in 1 month. And my child had just, at that point, was starting to sleep a little bit better because he was not a great sleeper. So here I am, pretty much sleep deprived, with a with kind of a high needs child at the time, because he was just not a great sleeper and he was kind of a colicky baby. Yeah, this is the time. That's how this brain works. So, but I did do it. I wrote a novel and I've never done anything with it since. I can be proud of myself for saying, hey, I met the goal of the word count, 50,000 words, and completed it from start to ending. There is a beginning, middle, and end. But this is garbage. It's hot garbage because I pantsed the whole thing. I had a premise. It was a cool premise. When I tell people about the premise, they're like, I would love to read that book. It was about this woman, and in the first chapter, you find out that she is dead. She is in heaven. She has no recollection of how she died, why she's here. And she notices that there's something different about her because everybody else in heaven is really happy, as one would suspect. But she is not happy. She just feels like something is missing. On top of that, you have the ability to kind of look down on what's going on Earth because you can check in on your loved ones or whatever. Instead, she just kind of starts like looking in her former neighborhood and she's just kind of spying on everybody. But she suspects that like there's a reason why like she's up there and that it wasn't a good reason. And she wants to kind of discover like the truth about why she died. She's not supposed to leave heaven, but you actually can. But if you do, you're putting your soul at risk because if you leave through the portal, you will just kind of be roaming around as a ghost, but your soul will be up for grabs. And Satan loves souls, and he's got a whole army of soldiers who are out there trying to reap souls of people that didn't go where that they were supposed to go. So obviously you're untouchable if you're in heaven, or if you did something really bad, you went straight to hell, but there's sort of this in-between space. It's not quite like what we think of traditional purgatory, but, you know, people just kind of end up as ghosts. And she's determined, though, she needs to solve this mystery. Plus, she'd kind of seen something going on in her neighborhood that she's kind of interested in learning more about. Which is funny, because as I'm talking about this sounds more like a mystery, but it wasn't a mystery. Like, the whole point was that I viewed it as a romance novel and that she was going to leave and she was going to fall in love with one of Satan's minions who is supposed to be like trying to reap her soul. The irony, of course, is that he actually hates working for Satan. This is not the job of his dreams. And from there, I didn't really have much of a plot. I didn't really focus on characterization of other side characters. It's really hard to figure out like how to make them meet, how to build that world where it's not quite like the world that we're in, because she can't really interact with it the way she would have if she was still alive. Plus, he's also kind of an undead. There's a lot of issues. So I just kind of wrote through it all, whatever came to me, just to meet the word count. But after, I was like, this is not good. I even realized like Satan was kind of a boring villain. So I was like, halfway through, I end up introducing this whole different antagonist character from hell that I thought was a lot more exciting. And long story short, once the writing was done, I was like, well, I guess we're done here, because that's also how my brain operates. So I printed it up with every intention of rereading this and making notes and maybe revising it, and never got around to that again. In fact, I've only tried rereading this maybe 2 or 3 times. But I've never really gotten past like the first couple of chapters, and then it feels cringe, so I just put it down. But maybe after I write this cozy, I'll come back to this one again and rework it. Because now that I said all that, I'm like, this might actually be better as a mystery than it would be as a romance, and I can just have some romance elements in it. I don't know. So there is a deep desire in me to be creative, but obviously the NaNoWriMo experience just didn't work for me because I didn't really give myself enough time to prep it. I thought I could just be a pantser and just let my creativity flow and it would all just come pouring out, and it really didn't work that way at all because I realized going through it I didn't have much of a plot. I just had a premise. So it was hard to get from like point A to point B because I just didn't know what my major plot points would be along the way. I did not learn from my mistakes though. All right, so I have a lot of struggles with writing as a neurodivergent writer. So I have ADHD and PMDD, and we'll talk about the ways that those both have an impact on my ability to write and really my ability to do most of the fun projects that I want to do. So part of the ADHD aspect for me is that I'm a very intense person, but also I'm very much into novelty seeking. I get bored with things incredibly easily, and I've just been that way all through. So I'm very easily excited and inspired by things, but it's very hard for me to stick with things long term. I am getting better at that slowly but surely with adulthood, but it's not the easiest thing. So just to give you an idea, like my ADHD puts me in sort of the category of multi-potentialite. So if you've heard that term before, cool. If you haven't, basically it's someone who is interested in many, many things. They are the opposite of a specialist. A specialist would be someone who just fixates on one thing and that is the only thing that matters to them. And multi-potentialites are interested in pretty much everything, and it's very hard for them to specialize in anything. Result, I have done a little bit of everything, but haven't really completed very much of anything, unless they're in like shorter bursts. So for example, like I joined a running club. It took me years to finally commit and stick to a running routine so that I could run a half marathon, which I did. And once I was done with that half marathon, I was done with running because that's really not for me. Currently doing karate, and I have my purple belt right now. I'm going for my blue belt next month. Even sometimes now that I'm in the messy middle, because I'm no longer having the novelty of being like a white or a yellow belt, and I'm still way far from my brown or black belt, it can be hard for me sometimes to like feel like I should keep sticking with this. It's hard to like persevere because things are getting harder and the novelty is worn off. Same thing with art. So getting into painting, getting into drawing, getting into knitting, and I will buy like a ton of supplies and then make like one project and then say I'm done with this now. So many things, dance classes, different types of gym classes, so many different things, different sports, varied interest. I tried a YouTube channel years ago and didn't stick with that either, but I'm really making the commitment now to start making more of an effort or figuring out ways to figure out what are the most important dreams that I have and then sticking with them. That multi-potentialite aspect can make things a little bit challenging because then I will get into what's called hyperfocus, where whatever that new novel activity is, that's all I want to think about, talk about, do until I don't. And that could be anywhere from like 1 to 3 months if it's not really going well, up to maybe like a year, and then that's if things are going really well. I love the fact that I am someone who gets excited about everything and I'm living a very full life and I'm curious and experimental. I think that's great. But I don't want to just look back on my life when I'm older and feel like I was just a dabbler, but I never really did anything with my life. And that's like kind of harsh because actually I do a lot with my life. I'm a teacher, I'm a parent, and there's a lot that I feel like I'm doing well, but I do feel like there is a part of me that has always felt like there's something that wants to be creatively expressed, but I don't know what it is. And it can be hard when you initially feel all these really great, exciting dopamine rushes, and then you get to where it gets harder and all that motivation just peters out, and then you feel stuck and your brain doesn't know how to organize what you're trying to do. So you end up just quitting. A big struggle with the ADHD front. With the PMDD front, that's a little bit different. So PMDD is just a more intense version of PMS. And what happens is during my follicular phase, which is from the start of my cycle till about ovulation, I am fine, I'm rational, I have all my best ideas, I'm high energy, I'm getting things done. After ovulation till the end of my cycle, it's just kind of a slow, steady descent into madness. I lose all my energy and I'm extremely exhausted. My ability to make decisions is very compromised. I second guess everything. I start to feel very negative about myself and the choices that I make and what's happening. And then that can lead to bigger emotions and some breakdowns that just are over silly things. And so that impacts so much of my life. It impacts a lot at work, obviously, but even on summer vacation, I have less symptoms because stress is the biggest factor in how bad my symptoms are going to be. And obviously, being a teacher is a stressful job, but also as someone who's very driven, and right now I want to write a novel, and we'll talk about how that's going in a minute, that's putting a lot of internal pressure on myself, so that's also impacting my symptoms. What I'm coming to sort of discover is that I should try to use my follicular phase for my idea generation and my plotting, and then use my luteal phase for the actual writing because all the decisions have been made. Same thing with after I finish the book, I should use my follicular phase for rereading it, writing out notes for revisions, and then during my luteal phase, I should work on actually completing those revisions. So I am coming up with strategies. Initially, I hadn't learned my lesson and I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to do Camp NaNoWriMo in July. I had been plotting my novel since about early May and really doing a better job of trying to sort of figure out the plot, who my characters are, what was going to happen along the way, having a clear picture of the beginning, middle, and end. But then I started getting really nervous about it once it was catching up to July and I felt like I wasn't ready. And then, of course, with my ADHD brain, I was out in my garden one day and then I had a whole new idea and I felt like, oh, maybe this is the idea I should go with. And I went and I spent hours plotting out what I was going to write for that book. And then that didn't go anywhere either. And then I started Camp NaNoWriMo and wrote like 4,000 words and then never wrote anything after that and was feeling pretty badly about myself. I've come to the conclusion that NaNoWriMo is great for some people. It is not good for me. What I'm trying this time around is a combination of a couple of things. So I'm doing Jane Calm's writing course. She has a Substack writing course. And it lists out, it's like in chapter form, but she also has this awesome, great page on the order of operations of like how you should go about plotting it. So in almost like a graphic organizer format, and then you read the chapters and she teaches you how to write a cozy murder mystery. So I've been getting a lot of great ideas from her course, but then I still felt like I needed more support because that's just once again reading a book essentially and then trying to apply it. And that was where I was getting stuck. So then I also somehow started getting informed about Ninja Writers, and this is a program that was designed by a woman who is a published author, Shonda Grimes, and she also has ADHD. So basically what she talks about is how she had written a book and got it published, but it took her 2 years to write the book. And then they told her, well, we need your next book written in 6 months. And she was like, how am I going to do this? Because the last one took 2 years. How am I going to do this in 6 months? So she designed this program and she used it to write her book in 6 months. And now she's teaching it to other people. So it's geared towards people with brains like mine. And I've started the coursework for that and I've made a lot of headway. So what I've kind of done is combine their two systems together and I'm working through that. So those are the two things that I'm really working with the most for getting through this. So I'm no longer going to be putting these big demands on myself because that's also what my brain likes to do. It likes to give me these like big challenges because I don't know if it just feels like that's what's going to boost it and give me more energy, but instead it just drains me and burns me out. So I feel like Camp NaNoWriMo or NaNoWriMo in general in November, they just, yes, they amp me up and get me excited, but then when I feel like I can't meet that expectation because it is very intense, then I'm like, well, I failed this, so there's no point in continuing on. And that's not a good way to look at things. I'm looking at breaking down each step into its smallest little nugget. In fact, in the Ninja Writers group, she really kind of focuses, one aspect of it is just writing for 10 minutes a day. If you write more than that, great, but the expectation is just 10 minutes a day, if that's all you've got. Because I was trying to put a lot of pressure on myself to finish this novel by the end of summer, before I went back to work. But now I'm like, you know what? We're not going to do that. We're going to find a way to build it into the routine in order to give myself the time and space and energy I need to write a better quality book without all the pressure. And then the other aspect is I carry around my writer's notebook with me everywhere I go now, because I find that, you know, I'm trying my best. So I will sit down, I'll get up early before the kids have to be up for camp, and I will spend that time working on the book and going through the coursework of these writing classes. But sometimes I really am stuck. I'll just find myself having all these lists and doing the exercises, but not feeling satisfied with what I'm coming up with. I'm just knowing it's like not quite what I want it to be. And that could just be my perfectionism, but it could just be an honest assessment that it's not quite where it needs to be. So I find that like when I go to karate class or yoga class, or I'm out on one of my walks, or I'm in the car, I will start having ideas. So I make sure to carry this around with me so that like after karate class or after yoga class, I can just quietly sit and jot them down before I leave. I have it in my car, so if I need to pull over, I can write something down. But sometimes I just use the voice memo app on my phone as well. Then I don't take this one because this is still a little bit large when I go for walks, but I have like a little mini size one. So just being open to having those ideas and making sure that I'm building in those kind of activities on a consistent basis, because that's when I seem to have my best ideas, is when I'm moving. So gardening is another one, cleaning, which is good because I don't really like weeding my garden and I don't really like cleaning. So if I know I'm going to get good ideas out of doing them, that's also motivating to do those things. So those are the big main things, but also making time for actual rest and having fun, because I find that when I get super hyper focused and then I feel like I'm not making that progress, that's when I start to feel really overwhelmed, stressed out. It's not good for my symptoms, and it's just going to make me want to give up, essentially. So making time to really like mentally reset, where when I'm doing something else, I'm actually trying to focus and be present on that thing. If I get a great idea, cool, but really I'm there to do that thing. And then allowing myself time to not hyper focus. So when I sit down to write, that's my hyper focus time. And if things come through during the time, great. If they don't, that's okay too. I at least showed up and tried my best. And then the rest of the day, I have to try to actively work to be present for those other things in my life that are equally important. So that way, this whole process will be more sustainable. That's really the goal here. I mean, the goal is to finish the book, but I'm only going to be able to finish the book if I do it in a sustainable way. So this is also sort of helping me grow as a person, I guess, because I've never been the type to do anything in a sustainable way. It's always like go big or go home. And sometimes that works out great, but most of the time it doesn't work out as well as I would have hoped that it would. That's where I'm at. If you have any great tips or suggestions, if you're a writer and you feel like you have tips that would help me to get through this book, let me know. In future episodes, I'll talk a little bit more about what I'm actually writing, how it's going, where I'm sort of stuck, and what I'm doing to get unstuck. But at this point, I'm still in the plotting stages of my book. And I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. I'd appreciate it. And I hope to see you in the next episode. Thanks. Bye.